Hello, BookTube, and greetings on a cold, rainy morning here in Boston. We're going to continue with my library tour, and this next shelf that we're doing has rampant cocking. Those of you who don't subscribe to Jason Harrigan's channel, Byways in Bookland, may not know what I'm talking about, or may think you do. Cocking is when you stack a book laterally on top of other books. Does all sorts of damage. And I don't know a book person that doesn't do it. And we've got not only cocking on the front shelf in front of the normally stacked books, but cocking on top of those. So who knows how long this will take. We'll start right away. All right. The first one is a classic. It's great. It's a great book. It's who actually does this? O.F. Mooreshead. But the point is not the editor. The point is the illustrator, Ernest Shepard, the illustrator of Winnie the Pooh. This is Everybody's Peeps. And it is an illustrated abridgment of the Diaries of Samuel Pepys. And the illustrations are wonderful. They're all wonderful. And the title might seem a little odd now, but once upon a time, almost a century ago, there would come along regular new scholarly abridgments or editions of not just Peeps, but anybody. And for a while, for a season, for several seasons, they would have the name of so-and-so's such and such, the editor's version of so-and-so. And that's where this title comes from, Everybody's Peeps. I ordinarily would rail a little against time-sensitive titles like that, except that this one has a wonderful other meaning, right? Everybody's Peeps also means that Peeps belongs to everybody. He's the kind of book that anybody would love. So in this case, I actually love the time-sensitive title. Then we have our next cocked book is very old. This is, when is this? 1902. This is Boston Days. This is an ex-library copy. Let me show you the actual front page in its with its onion skin protector. This is Boston Days by Lillian Whiting. And there is Lillian Whiting. And this is an old history of Boston, an old look at the founding of the city, the great eras of the city, the excerpts from the great authors, lots of letters. It's just the kind of feast of a book that isn't made anymore. I don't know why. I mean, there was just recently, in 2019, an excellent history of Boston, a big history of Boston. But this kind of history, that isn't meta history, that isn't social trend history, that is instead just great men and women, great ideas, great writing, excerpts, lots of excerpts, that sort of thing seems to have fallen out of favor. Nobody writes that anymore, and I love it. So I'm glad that I have this. I have quite a few, as you've seen in this library tour, quite a few such books on Boston. They should all be together. And, of course, 2019's book, The City-State of Boston, will be in this room. And it will be either with all those books or it'll be scattered willy-nilly like all these other things. Once I have, you've seen it, I have, we saw it on this library tour, out in the other room, I have a tall bookcase specifically collecting 2019's books, the books in 2019 that are likely to make it into my permanent collection. Probably 60% of them won't, but they are the runoff from the new books shelf that is the only shelf we didn't do on this library tour. And soon, it seemed inconceivable last January, but soon I will need to pull all those books off that bookcase and it will need to stay empty until it fills with 2020 books. And when that happens, some of those books will come in here. A handful of them will come in here. And this next one is Frank Muir. This is the Oxford Book of Humorous Prose. Lots and lots of great excerpts in here. The Oxford books, just in general, I praise them from time to time on this channel. I don't have anywhere near as many of them as I wish I did. The Oxford Book of Death, the Oxford Book of Friendship, the Oxford Book of Humorous Prose I have, but there are lots of others that I want. Just great editorial oversight so that you're getting lots of great stuff. Then we'll do the cocking on the inside here. Oh no, one of the cocked books on the inside shelf was also jammed. Oh no, we don't want yanking. This is very bad. What have we got here? This is, can't even read it in this dodgy Boston light. Again, we have an onion skin protector. This is Anna Fuller's A Venetian June. Also from 100 years ago, if I remember correctly. Oh no, even more, 1896. This is A Venetian June. This is a very typical Venetian romance. It's these things are a dime a dozen. This, as you can tell, was meant to be bought at your local bookseller before you go to Venice and packed so that you can read about all the sexy gondola riders that you're going to get while you go there. Never works out that way, but these things are still popular. Okay, this is also an ex-library book. This is by William Stearns Davis. This is probably also old, 1967. This is A Day in Old Rome, where the author just wakes up his character first thing in the morning and takes that character through a normal day. Gives the character a kind of a slice of life. So the character is not a slave. A day in the life of Rome for an industrial slave in a warehouse factory wouldn't be very interesting. This is instead someone who gets to go out and get food, gets to go to the market, gets to go to the Senate. So that noise you hear is Frida going crazy on the bed. She's thrashing around and she's making nasal noises because it's dark and rainy and she's fed up. She's fed up. And I don't know what to tell her. This is going to end. This weather is going to end. It's clear. It seems to me it will end tonight and be swept out by clear, cold weather. So we're going to have plenty of time outside, but there's no way. One of the horrible limitations of my people is that they do not posit action forward into the future. They can posit routines into the future. They can tell by the slant of the sunlight on the floor of the room that it's the time when you usually come home from work. But you can't tell them such and such a thing that isn't regular is going to happen in the future. They won't understand. They don't have a part of the brain that understands. Part of the brain they have that understands that is this big, as opposed to the part of the human brain that extrapolates actions into the future, which is this big. It's the biggest on the world. But anyway, she's not strangling to death. If that's you hear, that's just a restless schnauzer. That's all. Let's see. Okay, this is a classic as well. This is something I love, absolutely love. And I was overjoyed to find it in a hardcover, not only a hardcover, but a hardcover with one of those plastic covers over it, so I don't even need to do anything with it. Because this is the thing I reread all the time. And I've only ever usually had, until I was lucky enough to find this, I'd never had anything but paperbacks that fell apart. This is Farley Mowat. This is Owls in the Family. His kid's book about adopting 2 owls on the plains of Saskatchewan. And it is also illustrated. And it's full of anecdotes about Wall and Peeps. And it is absolutely charming. And like the best kids' books, works just fine for any age. It's just a wonderful book for any age. Okay, then we have, this is the great Terry Carr, the great science fiction editor Terry Carr. Did a whole bunch. He was constantly curating collections of short stories in fantasy and science fiction, constantly doing that. And he had a series, the best science fiction of the year. He did it over and over and over again, year after year after year. He also had a side series called The Universe that also became an annual thing, Universe 1, Universe 2, Universe 3, that reflected the fact that a huge amount of science fiction writing was done in short story form. So anthologies were a going concern. They were a booming thing. And I wish that I had all of those Terry Carr volumes. I would grab them in a heartbeat if I saw them. I used to have all of them in hardcover. But one way or another, I would have, if I could, I would have all of the Universe volumes and all of the Year's Best volumes. I only have one. This one, Universe 10. And the only reason that I have it is because it reprints The Ugly Chickens by Howard Waldrop, which is one of my favorite science fiction short stories, even though it has almost nothing you would recognize as science fiction in it. It's about the dodo. And it is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I periodically reread it. And I saved this just because all of the Universe 10 also came in a mass market paperback with a really cool cover illustration. And it was also in Year's Best Science Fiction. I think Terry Carr anthologized it twice because it was so striking. But other than that, you won't find it anywhere. Howard Waldrop is gone. from reprint culture. I'm pretty sure Them Bones, his novel, is gone. I'm pretty sure that if you went to, you know, Orbit or Del Rey or whatever and said, I've got an idea for a book, you know, I've got an idea for a book. How about we do a 1,000-page book on the collected short stories and novellas of Howard Waldrop? They'd walk you out of the room. I'm willing to bet that a large number of the people who work in that science fiction division would never have heard of Howard Waldrop. So it wouldn't happen. So I saved this, but really I ought to be on the lookout for all science fiction anthologies of short stories. I really should, because those are going to go away and those writers aren't going to come back. So anyway, okay, this next one is Paul Taylor and W.H. Auden did a translation of the Elder Edda. Selections of stories from the Elder Edda, the mythology of the Elder Edda, and they dedicated it, if I remember, to Tolkien. Yeah, they dedicated it to Tolkien. And again, I had this as a mass market paperback back when these sorts of things were made as mass market paperbacks. That would never happen anymore. But I had this as a mass market paperback and loved it. I absolutely love it. And the mass market paperback was regularly falling apart. I would be delicately holding it together with rubber bands, and then 10 years later I'd find another copy of that mass market paperback and go through the same process again. So I was very happy to find this as a hardcover. Now I go back to it, I don't have to worry about it disintegrating on me. Okay. This next one, sorry, this next one is a classic of historical reconstruction. This is the Lyell Letters. Arthur Plantagenet was a Tudor official and wrote voluminous letters, official and personal, and they fill many volumes. But this recension, this collection of them, fills them, selects all the really good ones, gives them their historical context, gives us a great introduction, lots and lots of notes. It's just a fantastic volume. Talk about bringing history alive. These are real people walking across these pages, and you can't miss it when you get it in a great edition like this. And I used to be on the lookout for this in hardcover, but this trade paperback is pretty sturdy, so I haven't been tempted the last few times. Oh, all right. I think I need to get on the horn about this thing. This is a beautiful illustrated edition of A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. Let me show you one of the illustrations. There are black and white and color illustrations all throughout, and I really need to get on to somebody about this. There we go. Sibling love. I need to get on to somebody about this because I think the next one is also out in this illustrated form, and I want all of them. And of course I do. I want all of them in this form. I really need to to check and see if that is the case. Actually, why don't I leave the contact out so I can try and do that. Let's see here. What is this next one? Oh, okay. Also something, this is the theme developing here, also something that I had in mass market paperback forever, and I would just read it to pieces and need to get another mass market paperback. So when I got a hardcover with a dust jacket, I was happy to have it because I reread this all the time. These last few that we've seen on this shelf, they are really a model of what I want for all of my books. I do not think that's unrealistic. I would like it if every single book that I own made me look at it the same way, made me respond in that way that you have, where you pull a book off the shelf and you are meeting an old friend. You are overjoyed that it's here. Now, you've seen in this library tour that a great number of the books that I have shown you do not produce that reaction in me. I'm happy about them, sure, but not this. All my books should be like this. And that's the goal. This is the Book of Merlin by T.H. White, originally conceived as a final chapter to his The Once and Future King, but split off into a book of its own, in which a very old King Arthur is taken by his old tutor Merlin the Wizard to a council to determine the worth of humankind. And the council, aside from Merlin and Arthur, is entirely composed of animals. An owl, a snake, a goat, a dog, most memorably a little hedgehog. And they debate. With Merlin's guidance and with Arthur's participation, they debate the worth of mankind. What is the good of man? And it's amazing. It's just amazing. As amazing as it's also illustrated. As amazing as The Once and Future King is, and I think not enough people know how amazing it is. This is that purified and distilled, intensified. There is old King Arthur and his hedgehog looking out on England, looking out on the country that is his, that is synonymous with him. This is a magical book. No pun intended. I reread it all the time. So, and now I have hardcover, so I don't have to worry about the book falling apart. Okay, this is Leah Price's How to Do Things with Books in Victorian Britain. Just fantastic. A study of books in Britain. Shouldn't be here. Should be with the bookish books. Maybe I should leave it out to facilitate that. But not, I admit, the same reaction as most of these other things. Obviously, the Auden Elder Edda, Owl in the Family, the Book of Merlin, the Ugly Chickens. Those things are part of my reading soul. This I just loved. I loved enough to keep it in this room. So I shouldn't say it. It sounds kind of odd to say I just loved it. But when you're in the little book room, you're dealing with the books that do exceed love. Or should. Not all of them do. I bet. Well, not all of them on this shelf will. Okay, this is George Rager's Wander on My Native Shore. He goes all the way up the eastern seacoast of the United States, and it's first-rate nature writing, just first-rate, absolutely wonderful. Then we have N.T. Wright. Some of you will know his name. He is a prolific author, a religious author. This is The Day the Revolution Began, reconsidering the meaning of Jesus' crucifixion. And he makes a joke about how that wasn't the original planned title for the American edition of this book, but he said, you Americans, you got to get the word revolution in there somewhere. Tom Wright is a gentleman and a scholar. He is funny. He is thoughtful. He is fascinating to read. I am one of the few atheists, I would imagine, anywhere in the world who've read his enormous books on St. Paul. And when we're talking enormous, they're gigantic, and I've read them and studied them. This is much more popular, much more general access type thing, and I think the only book of his that's in this room. I just loved it. I love the way he writes. I don't agree with anything that he writes, but I love the way he writes. Okay, this is from Oxford University Press. This came out a few years ago. This is Richard Lansdowne's edition of the Letters and Journals of Lord Byron. There is he in Turkish dress. And if you've ever read the Letters or Journals of Lord Byron will know why this would have a perennial appeal, because Byron is absolutely vibrant on the page when he is being confessional. I mean, you've got his poems, and they are doing things of their own, and they're high art, in my opinion. The letters and the journals are a totally different register. They support my contention, I believe. It's total heresy to say it when it comes to Lord Byron. But his letters and journals support my contention that most people who make a living writing what we now call fiction, the poems would certainly come under that rubric, were better suited temperamentally and artistically to write nonfiction, and just couldn't make a living at it. That's all. I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong. Byron certainly loved his metrical games, but if he had been able to make a pile of money, Newstead Abbey saving amount of money, writing observations on his day, Alan Bennett-style journals, and publishing them, I don't think he would have done poetry except as an exercise among friends. That is total heresy, but nevertheless, if the market had allowed him to be financially wealthy, writing nonfiction, I think he would have done that. That's probably my prejudice in the matter, but nevertheless, I think I could make a textual defense of it. But anyway. Okay, we saw this author before. This is Mark Churro. This is his great book, Life in the English Country House. Great big thing. I had this in a trade paperback, a big trade paperback for a long time, but it's a big illustrated thing. And when it's a big illustrated thing, you don't want a trade paperback if you can avoid it, because if you're going to be consulting it, you're going to pull it apart. And this is his study of English country houses. It really was kind of eye-opening. when he first did it. It's as English country houses, not just as decorative places with bad plumbing, but as alternate sources of political and social power. Very much designed to facilitate that. Just fascinating. For somebody, especially somebody like me who's fascinated by English country houses just in general, this is just the work to have on them. And then what is this last one? Oh my! Oh goodness gracious! This is a companion volume to an exhibit that was once at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. This is the Great Boston Collectors. Wow, I didn't know I still had this. This is the book. It's a typical thing, and it gives you there's the daughters of Edward Darley Benoit, and there's a storm coming up on the sea. See these classic, iconic Boston Museum of Fine Arts paintings. You get all of them in full color, and then you also get a great historical monograph on the museum and on the lives of these collectors who endowed the museum with these paintings, and by extension, life of the museum itself. So I'm glad I have it, especially since the Dream 1-volume, enormously illustrated, complete history of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, I don't think has been written. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. One of you might know better, but I don't think I've seen that book, and that's amazing to me. This would have to be a seminal germ seed of that book, but there are lots of stories. I don't think that I've read that book, and I would like to. If you come to Boston, we will go to the Museum of Fine Arts, and we will then cross the street and go to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. You have to do the two of them. You have to do them the same day, and you will hear me drone on about the stuff in both museums. I know every brick, I know every crack, I know every painting, I know every artist detail of everything before 1900. In those museums. So, but anyway, that is our next shelf. Not a bad one, full of stuff that makes my heart go pitter patter. So I'm gonna work from this shelf. I'm gonna contact Bantam and see if the next volume of Game of Thrones is available in illustrated edition, and if so, can he have it? And I will also move How to Do Things with Books to the book section, which will clear up room here and maybe ease the cocking that's going on. but anyway, that's it for now. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.